Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 407 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up at 4:30, Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania is here. He'll react to Vladomyrr Zelensky campaigning in his state for Kamala Harris at U.S. taxpayer expense. He flew in on a big C-17. Congressman Perry reacts. Kurt Schlichter is here at 5 o'clock. He'll react to all of the so-called national security officials who are once again meddling in our election. They've endorsed Kamala, so that we get more war. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A note that we're sharing today, and I'll remind you about throughout the week. I will be out at the Courthouse Plaza in Arlington for early voting, 8 o'clock Friday morning. I have donuts and coffee in hand as you begin early voting in Arlington this Friday. Again, the Courthouse Plaza. I'll share more information with you as the week moves along. But if you'd like to get together, that's a good place to do it. And we'll share a cup of coffee and a donut, and then you'll go vote. That's the plan. That's ahead. All right, and you can join us today, 888-630-9625. Joining us now on the phone is Miranda Devine. She's a columnist for the New York Post, and she has a brand new book out today. It's called The Big Guy, How a President and His Son Sold Out America. Miranda, great to have you back with us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Vince. It's great to be with you.
And congratulations on yet another sure-to-be very successful book. Tell us about this.
Thank you. Well, it's really the sequel to The Laptop from Hell, which was all about Biden family corruption that we found in the laptop and from some whistleblowers. But as the years have gone by, the biggest story turned out to be the cover-up, and that's what The Big Guy is about. It's basically the story of how the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, the Department of Justice, the IRS, all conspired to protect Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, who was a crack addict, and also Joe Biden's younger brother, Jim Biden, who was involved in this family influence peddling business, to protect them from the consequences of their greed and their recklessness.
Yes, and that saga continues, although it's even more out of sight now because Joe Biden has been replaced by Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. But Hunter Biden's legal troubles continue. It was just recently he was filing this guilty plea in California for his tax violations. What do you make of that saga and the way it's going?
Well, it hasn't finished because the very people who covered up for Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and Jim Biden are the very people who are now protecting Kamala Harris and who have elevated her to this status, and who we just saw this week, you just mentioned it, the 741 senior officials from the national security community who signed that letter endorsing Kamala Harris as, believe it or not, the most serious and most capable candidate to be commander-in-chief. And these are the same people that propped up Joe Biden, that protected his son Hunter when he was ricocheting around the world, taking in millions of dollars from, shady oligarchs and CCP military officials, and while he was on crack. You have 9 of those 741 officials that signed that Kamala Harris letter also signed what I call the Dirty 51 letter, which was the letter published before the 2020 election in response to our stories about the laptop, pretending that the laptop was Russian disinformation. And that letter, as I reveal in the book, turned out to be not just a letter written and signed by 51 former intelligence officials, including 5 former acting directors or directors of the CIA. It was instigated by Antony Blinken, now Secretary of State, then a senior official in the Biden campaign. And it was written by Mike Morell, former acting director of the CIA. And it was signed off on by then CIA Director Gina Haspel under Donald Trump. She signed off on that letter. It was so political that it was sent upstairs to her desk through a few hands, and she approved it for publication, even though they all knew it was not Russian disinformation. They knew that the laptop was real. The FBI had it in their possession for
Yes.
10 months by that stage. And very shortly, they had figured out, yes, it was Hunter Biden's. No, it had not ever been tampered with. Nothing had been added to it or subtracted from it. And it was fit to use in a court of law, which is exactly what happened in June with Hunter Biden's gun felony charge in Delaware, and as you just mentioned, in California with his tax trial where he pleaded guilty on day one.
You know, one of the common elements, in addition to the signatories between these various letters endorsing Democrats and attacking Trump, is that it all, now that we've seen this story 1,000 times, many versions of it covered by you, it's all just a racket. It's all just a racket to protect very corrupt schemes. You know, the second I saw this letter come out this week from 700 national security people, a bunch of generals, I thought, my first thought was not, like, oh, what's the virtue by which they're making this claim? My first thought was, what defense contractors do all these guys work for? What consultancies? What consultancies do they work for? What jobs are they hoping for in a Biden and now a Harris administration? I mean, because all I see is people trying to line their pockets and doing it at the expense of the rest of us.
Yes, and what is the industry that they're in that lines their pockets? It's the war industry. And this is why they despise Donald Trump and they portray him as an existential threat. And he is an existential threat, not to America, not to democracy. He's an existential threat to them and their power. These deep state actors, the blob, as the Obama people used to call them, which is that triumvirate of the CIA, the State Department, and the Pentagon. Donald Trump is an existential threat to them because he's a practical man. He's a property developer from Queens. He treats all problems in his presidency from first principles in a logical fashion, including the foreign relations problems. And there were many when he came into office. And by the time he finished, he had sorted things out so that we had Vladimir Putin never invaded anywhere when Donald Trump was president. The Middle East was calm because of the Abraham Accords. ISIS was kaput. We had Iran on its knees, completely broke, unable to fund these proxy attacks on Israel. Everything was calm. And then, of course, Biden gets in and he is a puppet of the blob. He is their creature. And so they love him and they reactivated their crazy agenda. And what they hate is that Donald Trump is no one's puppet. He's completely uncontrollable. He is not following their agenda. He follows his own agenda, and that is why he was good for America.
And it's crazy. I mean, in a bunch of ways, it's crazy. If it's just a profit motive, I mean, one thing to remember, Trump's not a pacifist. He's a big believer in peace through strength. He wants to grow the military. He wants to have the weapon stockpiles necessary to defend this country. He only wants to prosecute wars that are directly in the American interest. He's not some peacenik. He's not a guy who's saying there's never any circumstance to go to war. He's the guy who hit Qasem Soleimani. I mean, there's clearly, in other words, like there's a friend to the military in Donald Trump. And the other piece is, like, how could you sign a letter, call yourself a general officer, and then sign a letter that to support the woman who's overseeing the administration that has led to the biggest troop recruitment problems this century in the American military, the lowest morale in the American military, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the forced jabs, the firings of chaplains who raised religious objections over those forced jabs? How in the world can you, with a straight face, say this woman is better than Donald Trump to be commander-in-chief?
Because they are the generals that are responsible for those debacles. They're the generals that have brought in the woke virus into the military. Look at General Milley, and remember his testimony about white rage, his sabotage of his commanding officer, of the commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, when he was president. These generals are political animals, and they make lots of money coming in and out of government and military jobs from the military-industrial complex, obviously. And, it sounds paranoid to talk like that, but I think we've seen enough evidence just in the Trump and Biden era to bolster it and to make you understand what the stakes are and how corrupt these people are. Of course they are supporting Kamala Harris because she is more of the same. It's no surprised that during her endorsement speech at the DNC, when she accepted the nomination in Chicago a few weeks ago, that she emphasized, a brutal military. She was endorsed by Dick Cheney. That is who she is, because that's not really, she's not a military person. She's a far left radical, but to get the job, to stay in the job, she knows that she has to be a creature of the blob.
Yeah.
And she'll be anyone's creature to get power, and that's what she's doing, just like Joe Biden did before her. And her running mate, Tim Walz, is a chip off the old block with Biden, because he's also a creature of the CCP. He was captured by the Chinese Communist Party early on when he was a young teacher.
Yeah.
He's been back every year for 30 years. His wedding anniversary, he got married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square massacre. He came back from China telling his pupils how brilliant China was, and there was no crime. Of course, there isn't in an authoritarian society. And he was just like Joe Biden when he had his first, as a young senator, his first trip to China. He was wined and dined and duchessed by the senior level of the CCP, taken to an island like Martha's Vineyard, came back and was so embarrassingly lavish in his praise of China that the Weekly Standard at the time put him on the front page. I think it was the front cover, just mocking him mercilessly.
Yeah. By the way, the fact that he got married on when I first heard that Tim Walz got married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square.
How sick is that?
I thought in his defense for a half second, I was like, well, maybe it's a coincidence. It turns out it wasn't even a coincidence. He did it on purpose. No. He said he wanted a, quote, date he'll always remember. How demented is that?
So would all the victims of the massacre remember it, and their families. I mean, it would be like, someone getting married on 9/11.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so twisted. And in fact, it wouldn't even be like an American. It'd be like, a Saudi or one of the hijackers' nationalities getting married then. It's just very callous and lacking empathy, I think. It's really bizarre.
It's so crazy. Hey, so on back to the Biden family for a moment. Hunter Biden, the White House and Karine Jean-Pierre, who, by the way, has never lied to us. I just want to be really clear. They keep claiming that Joe Biden is not going to pardon Hunter. He's not going to commute any sentence. He's going to stay out of this completely. Do you buy that? And when do you think the commutation or pardon are coming?
No, of course I don't buy it. I mean, it's not as if Joe Biden hasn't been loose with the truth in his past. I mean, that's what he's known for. He's probably the biggest liar that's ever graced the Oval Office, I would say. I would say he'll probably do it after the election in that sort of lame duck period, and he'll have an excuse, and the media will excuse him and say, oh, well, he's a poor man. He's an elderly man with a fading memory, and he's had so much tragedy in his life, and, how can you begrudge a man for protecting his only son? And, anyone who objects will be just cast as a callous, mean person. But that's not, when he says, I give you my word as a Biden, you can take it to the bank that he's lying.
By the way, I'm really looking forward to his excuse for the pardon. It's going to be something like, Hunter is being unfairly persecuted because he's my son. It's going to be so pitch perfect because, meanwhile, he's the guy who's been constantly trying to imprison his own political opponent for purely sick, callous political reasons. And everyone and the media will just nod along, the legacy press. But not you, Miranda Devine at the New York Post. Thank you very much. Great to talk to you as always.
Thanks, Vince.
That's Miranda Devine. The book is The Big Guy, How a President and His Son Sold Out America. Get it while history is still allowed to be expressed. All right, let's go to the phones. I've got Donna calling in from Frederick, line 1. Hello, Donna. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hello, Vince. What an amazing show. You've had so many outstanding guests. And, boy, Miranda, she's so brave. It just blows my mind.
I love Miranda so much.
I got to thinking about, fantastic. And I'm thinking about the reason why these people drew the line in the sand. And we're looking at Republicans and Democrats that, the 700 or however many. A lot of it is really about the globalist versus the sovereign. And the sooner people realize that, the better off we're all going to be.
Amen.
Because I think most of us are sick of the endless lies, the endless wars, inflation, printing, oppression, subjugation, surveillance. I mean, I could go on and on with this.
Yes.
And maybe that's what this Great Awakening is all about. I think, yeah, it's going to be rough. I don't expect it to be easy, but nothing worth fighting for is easy.
Well,
ever.
This is where President Trump comes into the conversation and the equation. I can't identify in my life a greater clarifying agent than Donald Trump. Trump's emergence on the scene in 2016 and his entire political existence since has really served to clarify what side of that line everybody's on, hasn't it, Donna? Like, you can kind of tell where everybody is. People that you used to look up to, you used to think, oh, that guy's a smart Republican, and all of a sudden you're like, now he went crazy. What's wrong with him? It turns out that guy was always on the wrong side of that line. You just didn't realize it until Trump came along and said, here's the line, and that guy's on the wrong side of it.
Yes, and money's the root of all evil. People need to remember that. And as all the exposure comes out with respect to the Sean Combs case and Epstein, I think that's why we're seeing what we're seeing now, the threats of war, the threats of cybersecurity, Iran. I mean, it's all connected. And if people connect the dots, they'll see the big picture.
Yeah, you tend to find a lot of the same characters involved in all of these massive problems confronting the country. It's like, wait, that guy's there again? What? How does his name involved again? Thank you, Donna. Yeah, no, it's a good point. And that whole Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy or whatever he's calling himself these days, that thing's crazy. They've got like a massive list of celebrities that were going to what the feds are alleging is basically a sex dungeon, that he had all sorts of awful things going on, they say. And we'll see where that goes. They've charged him with racketeering, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. They say he abused, threatened, coerced women and others around him to fulfill sexual desires. And there's a massive list of so-called A-list celebrities who were all connected to this, and now everyone's running for the hills. We'll see what happens. 429. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 4:36 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Kurt Schlichter will join us at 5 o'clock. We'll talk to him about these 700 or so national security officials, former generals who all say that they're now endorsing Kamala Harris, because she's good for the troops. She's good for peace and stability. Kurt reacts to that. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. This week at U.S. taxpayer expense, Vladomyrr Zelensky campaigning in Pennsylvania. Take a listen to this.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here with my team. And started, as I said to colleagues, started my visit to America from your city, from your plant, from Pennsylvania, and just some number. You said that 400 people work here, but I want...
He was at an artillery plant. He and the Pennsylvania governor, Democrat Josh Shapiro, they were autographing some of the artillery that will be used to kill human beings soon. Very excited, lots of grinning going on. A Pennsylvania Democrat congressman by the name of Matt Cartwright, well, he was positively tingling.
It was surreal to have Ukrainian President Vladomyrr Zelensky come here and express his thanks and support for the effort that we're engaged in here. It was off the charts in terms of the kind of spine-tingling surreality that I've ever experienced.
Yeah, he was so excited. And remember, Zelensky arrives in a C-17, the Biden-Harris administration paying for this campaign. Additionally, as Zelensky was showing up, an interview that he had just conducted with The New Yorker included him saying that President Trump doesn't actually know how to end the war in Ukraine, and that he thinks that J.D. Vance is a radical, in case you're wondering which political campaign he's supporting. Joining me now to discuss all of it, Congressman Scott Perry is here. He represents Pennsylvania's 10th Congressional District. Sir, good to have you with us.
Well, Vince, it's great to be with you. I was just listening to the report, and I'm wondering what the cost per hour of a C-17 is and how a campaign goes to pay for one of those. I used to fly some military aircraft myself, and they're wildly expensive because it's not just your average, aircraft. So I'd be interested in that. But quite honestly, I think the war in Ukraine is horrific. Russia has attacked Ukraine. It's trying to gobble up its territory. If I'm a commander, I want to be with my troops. I mean, I hate to say it this way, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it seems to me that this Zelensky guy spends almost as much time out of his country as he does in his country, and his country's in a very hot war.
Well, Scott Perry, Congressman Perry, it's not a mistake that he's in Pennsylvania, though. Pennsylvania is, as every political observer seems to know, the pivotal state in this election, and all of a sudden Zelensky arrives there as he's insulting both Trump and J.D. Vance. Can he be any more clear about what he's doing?
It seems like obviously he's shilling for the Harris-Walz ticket and what they will provide, unlimited funding without any questions asked, regardless of the corruption, regardless of all those tax dollars. Look, we want Ukraine to win. Let me be clear. I want Ukraine to win. I want Russia out. I don't agree with anything that they've done. But we also know that there is no accountability for the billions of dollars that have been sent to Ukraine. And it'd be one thing, Vince, if we were buying just those artillery rounds. But I hope your listeners know you're paying for the salaries and pensions of all the Ukrainian government workers. Like, we can't even afford – understand that every single cent that members of Congress vote for or on in Congress is borrowed. Every single cent is borrowed. And we're paying for their government employees. We can't even afford our own government employees.
Some estimates say that Congress has now authorized upwards of $175 billion of various forms of assistance to Ukraine. And as you mentioned, that involves paying not only for the government, but the pensions of the people within that government. Additionally, CBS reported some time ago that we've been subsidizing small businesses. We're paying for all of the police. We're paying for all the firefighters. We're paying for everything in that country. And the question that's on the minds, I think, of so many Americans, definitely my mind, is to what end? I mean, obviously, I agree with your basic sentiment, which is I want Ukraine to succeed. I don't want Russia to invade them. But how many lives will be lost before this thing can come to some sort of negotiated peace at the very least?
Well, we would like to see any plan for what the conclusion of this is. Like, what is the outcome going to be when we finally said enough? Is it Russia completely out of Ukraine? Look, I would love to see that happen.
Sure.
I would actually love to see Russia out of Crimea too. I think it's all been theft under the at the end of a barrel of a gun. But I don't know this administration's plan to make any of that happen. It seems to me the plan is to just continue to send artillery shells and whatever else is needed to Ukraine, including funding their government and their essential services, for as long as they demand it and as long as this President Zelensky comes over and makes appearances in his Fidel Castro uniform.
Yeah, for sure. So you asked a really important question. What does it cost to operate a C-17 and to fly him around? It's pretty clear to me that this was a publicity stunt at U.S. taxpayer expense. Even if we were to foot the bill, aren't there smaller planes we can use to transport the guy? I mean, I know the military has all sorts of private jets that they fly generals around. Why couldn't we have used one of those instead of a massive C-17 to move Zelensky?
Why doesn't he fly one of his own planes?
Yeah.
I mean, heck, we've given him a pile of them, haven't we?
Yeah, endlessly.
Yeah, I don't know why he has to use do you know, Vince, I don't know if you've ever been in a C-17, but for those of us who have, it's usually how you end up going to a deployment or coming out of a deployment. It is a massive machine with a lot of room in it. Now, I'm sure he travels with his people and so on and so forth, but I guarantee you that there is no necessity for a C-17 to carry Mr. Zelensky from his country to our country. There was no need for that.
But this is pretty explicitly election interference, though, what we're witnessing. So it's being done by the U.S. government. They're bringing Zelensky in. They're trying to convince Pennsylvanians to support Kamala Harris. I remember the last guy who was in the White House being impeached for his conversations with Ukraine as he was trying to establish the extent to which Joe Biden had any level of corruption in that country. Why not impeach Biden and Harris today for this behavior? It's crazy to witness, isn't it?
Well, look, this is a one-sided deal. There's only one side that's criticized. I mean, Harris should obviously be under scrutiny because she has continued the lie of, an infirm president that really obviously shouldn't be in the presidency.
Yes.
Obviously, the right thing for it to happen is for Joe Biden to not be the president, and Kamala Harris, as much as I loathe saying this, should actually be serving as the president. But she's not going to allow that to happen, because then she would own the last 4 years without any question, and she can't be tied to the Biden administration. Look, she's running as an outsider, right? So she's trying to distance herself as much as possible from Joe Biden, having just been, tied to with him at the hip, being the last person in the room and so on and so forth. But look, most Americans get the joke here. The only ones that don't are the completely partisan leftists that are going to vote for a ham sandwich as long as it's got a D before its name.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about how that election is going in your state, in Pennsylvania, being such a pivotal state. By the way, just as by way of correction, I mentioned earlier Pennsylvania, and I casually said that it had 16 electoral votes. I shorted you 3. It's 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. It is such a critical state. How do you see things going? We've seen some early data suggesting that Republican voter registration is unusually high right now in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What are you seeing, sir?
Well, as you said, Pennsylvania remains the keystone state for many reasons, and of course, it's going to be the pivotal state in this election, both up and down the ticket. And I will tell you this, Vince. The people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania can't afford their groceries. They're buying them with their credit cards. They can't afford gasoline, electricity, daycare. Heaven forbid they've got to buy a new house or a new car. They are sick of the Biden administration, but they also know that the left is rabid, and so many people have their heads down. They're just trying to be quiet, and I think what they're planning to do is obviously register their discord at the polls. But in the meantime, they're trying to maintain their work relationship, their family relationships by not discussing it. And let's face it, in the last presidential election in Pennsylvania, there were many questions and anomalies based on a brand new law that was put into place, and then decisions that were made by people other than lawmakers with no accountability. That law still remains in place. And so, we have things like drop boxes for ballots, for mail-in ballots, spread across Pennsylvania. And as I said before, I think to you, Vince, I don't understand why we've got to have drop boxes for mail-in ballots when most citizens have a mailbox at the end of their driveway, but yet that's the kind of stuff that's still going on in Pennsylvania. So we have to be able to overcome whatever goofiness might occur or has occurred in the past in Pennsylvania by overwhelming the vote for, in favor of Donald Trump. And I do think that people are willing to do that. They just look, Harris has shown them no reason to vote for her. And even if you might disagree with some of the things that President Trump says or the way he says them, you also know with irrefutable facts that your life was better 3.5 years ago. And and so I think at the end of the day, people are going to come to the resolution that there is no choice. You have to vote for President Trump, not only for your own well-being, but for the general well-being of the nation.
One of the other, there's a lot of issues in Pennsylvania. Certainly a lot of the country was focused in 2020 on how those ballots were being tabulated and handled in Pennsylvania. One of the issues that I remember at the time was something called ballot curing. And it was Democrat districts in particular. They would receive a ballot, they'd look at it, and they'd go, I don't think the voter meant this. And they'd go back to the voter and they'd say, hey, you want to fix this thing? You want to change it up? And you had elections officials in Democrat districts working directly with voters to change these ballots, to, quote, cure them. Meanwhile, Republican districts, no such thing was going on. Is that going to be the same this cycle?
Well, that's one of the things that we're on the lookout for. It's one of the reasons I objected to the electors pending an investigation of things like that, because, Vince, we're supposed to have one standard in our country, right? If you're going to cure ballots in one county, then you must be allowed to cure them in all counties. And, of course, the Secretary of State, playing for the Democrats, only offered it in some places and not others, which is called disparate treatment or unequal treatment under the law. We're laser focused on that and so many other things in Pennsylvania and across the country to make sure that people can trust and have faith in the fidelity of our election. But, Vince, we have to be watching and we have to be working every day, because if we don't, those are the things that are going to continue to occur.
Congressman Scott Perry, finally, on elections, one of the big things that you can control, even if there is nonsense going on behind the scenes, one of the things you can control is turnout to the extent that you get your people out. I know that some of the conversation, including I think from President Trump on the campaign trail, is like people like evangelical voters and gun owners. It might be a surprise to some. Turns out our low propensity voters don't always go to the polls. What's happening in Pennsylvania to make that happen and make sure people actually show up and cast those ballots for President Trump?
Vince, you're absolutely correct about that. So we are making an effort to go to churches, to go to gun clubs and to gun stores and remind people that their rights and their freedoms and the things that they hold dear are dependent on their voice being heard. And I often tell, look, it's not just gun owners and it's not just evangelicals.
Yes. It's
actually Republicans in general. And I tell Republican audiences, if every Republican that was registered Republican would vote, just vote, we would win every single election. We just need our people to vote. And but you can't go hunting that day. You can't have something else going on. We have 50 days of voting in Pennsylvania. There's absolutely no excuse for your voices to not be heard. And
yes.
So we are doing a lot of what the Democrats have done in the past. We are going out and making sure that those ballots get turned in and that the votes are registered. That's what we're spending as much time trying to convince people that they should vote Republican for all the right reasons, but we're not taking it for granted. We're not stopping there.
Yeah.
We're identifying Republican voters, and we're talking to them to make sure that their voices are heard and their vote is cast.
I love it, and I do see a lot of people who seem very motivated right now to get people out. I mean, here in Virginia, we're doing what we can to try and get people to the polls in a really interesting and close state. My brother's in Pennsylvania. I was just talking to him yesterday, and he's church. I said, are they registering people there? And he said he's going to talk to his Knights of Columbus and see if they can get people registered in the back of the church. So everyone's doing their part. Lots of people coming out to try. Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, sir, thank you very much for your time today. All right, just want to let you know, in case you haven't heard, that we'll be out doing early voting again this week in Arlington this time. We figured, why not? Why don't we go to the deepest blue area we can find? Let's go to Courthouse Plaza in Arlington on Friday. So we'll be doing that 8 o'clock Friday morning. I hope to see you there. If you're an Arlington voter and you haven't cast your ballot yet, by all means, please come out. Maybe you already did. Come out anyway. You can see us out there, wave a Trump flag or something, and drive the lefties crazy. You'll be able to detect them by their scowls and their COVID masks. There they are. Out at the Courthouse Plaza, Arlington, 8 o'clock. We'll have coffee and donuts. If you'd like to bring your own, you're welcome to. We could turn it into a potluck. It doesn't really matter. I did run out of donuts last week, so we're going to try and up the ante a bit. We'll bring a few more as we go out there. Let me take a phone call. I've got Jerry in Fairfax, line 2. Hello, Jerry. It's good to have you on the Vince Columnist Show.
Thanks. Enjoyed the show.
Thank you, Jerry.
If you think of Biden leaving Afghanistan,
yeah,
you saw the picture of all these people hanging on to 141. Inside, I guess a crew member took a picture, and you saw a gazillion people inside. Now, there's an idea of Zelensky, one person inside that aircraft, which is we're wasting a lot of money.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge waste of money. We flew him around on a C-17 as he's touring the country. It's about $17,000 an hour, just to be crystal clear. $17,000 an hour to operate a C-17. And so that's what you and I, Jerry, had the unfortunate displeasure of spending money that we don't even have on. But they just printed that. Don't worry, you'll cover it in your eggs and your milk and your gas and your everything, all the cost of everything, so we can shuttle Zelensky around hat in hand to beg for even more. $17,000 is chump change. He wants billions, or as Trump put yesterday, $60 billion. Every time he shows up, he gets another $60 billion. Coming up, Kurt Schlichter is here. He has some thoughts about this war machine, 700 of whom just offered their endorsement of Kamala Harris. They're joining Zelensky and Vladimir Putin in that, and Iran.